everyone, and we are officially a week out from Earth Day. I know my face hasn't been around for a while, but just a brief reintroduction. My name is Ingrid. I am one of the longtime organizers, it's hard to believe, of March for Science, as well as the director of satellite engagement. And I'm super, super excited to say that, it's been 5 years of March for Science, and we are returning with a full week of programming, satellites being engaged all around the globe. Personally, I am very invested and very excited to spend some time talking with Josh, Tiffy, and Omar here with my home satellite of New York City. We're just here today to talk about what we've been up to, what our satellite's all about, and what it's really meant to us to March for Science for the last 5 years, and what returning to the streets after 2 years of being virtual and organizing remotely due to the pandemic has really been like. Without further ado, maybe I'll let the three of you introduce yourselves, and then we can chat.
Josh, it's all yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Josh, making my debut here on the March for Science national stage. So I am the co-chair of March for Science in New York City, along with Ingrid here. I was formerly one of the two programming directors with Tiffany, who's also on the call here. And I'm really excited about our event that's happening next week. So we are hitting the streets demanding climate action locally in New York and asking for accountability on New York City climate goals. So we'll be asking for three major things. The first being for the civic engagement of scientists in this climate space. The second being the accountability of the city in building new infrastructure that is both sustainable and does not include the creation of new fossil fuel infrastructure. And then finally, all of this has to be done without creating new jails or disproportionately impacting communities that are frontline in New York City for climate. So I'll toss it to Omar.
Oh, I wanted to toss it to Tiff, but all right. So hi. You said we'll dance, and I was like, Tiff is next. Dance.
Omar's never played hot potato before. You can't just.
So, hi everybody. My name is Omar Guayed. I'm a co-founder of March for Science New York City, along with Ingrid. I was the former co-chair. Now I'm the treasurer. Yeah, I'm the treasurer of March for Science New York City. I'm also so all of us have science careers essentially. So I'm doing my postdoc over the Naval Research Lab, shooting lasers and stuff. That's most of what I do. How high-powered electric fields interact with nanoparticles, and I'm really excited, for another year of the March. We founded this movement because we are scientists who found that, this movement, there's a lot of talk about how we need to increase funding for the sciences, or we need to advocate for the sciences, and not enough talk about we need to advocate for scientists in our communities and use science for the common good. So what's the point of funding the sciences if these scientists aren't used to uplift us all and benefit us all, which is why a lot of us got into the sciences in the first place. So that's I'm proud for 5 years, and we'll keep this conversation going as to why we're doing what we're doing and what we see in it. And with that, I'm going to pass it finally to Tiff. After that dance, I really wanted you to go next.
It's okay. No problem. All right, thanks, Omar. Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Kilfeather. I'm the current co-director of programming for March for Science NYC. As Josh said, my current other co-director of programming, Alyssa Shearer, is not on the call, but she's excellent and a wonderful co-director. So yeah, I've been working with March for Science NYC since the end of 2018, I believe, on our programming and our marches. And I think my favorite thing about being part of this org is our motto of educating to empower. So a lot of our programming has a very big educational component. And I love what we do to connect scientists to the public and get them more engaged in the community and activism and outreach and education. So yeah, that's my involvement with March for Science NYC.
It's really, I know all of us have said it, but it's really hard for me to believe it's been 5 years since the first March. I don't know, Tiff and Josh, were you in DC that day? I don't remember.
I was in DC.
You were in DC? Yeah, and I remember so just for some history for folks for the city organizing, but Omar and I started organizing with March for Science, and Josh apparently too was also in DC as grad students. And we really just it was really just this explosive moment on social media where I felt like everyone I knew within academia was sharing this event. And I literally, like, I think Omar either texted you after class or I came up to you after class, and I was like, do you want to go to DC with me?
Yeah, we were at like Chipotle or Panera Bread or
Yeah,
something
which is like right
that.
by campus or something.
You're like, protest. You protest a
Yeah.
lot. You want to like help organize for us to go to DC, and that was kind of how it got kicked off. And then we got stuff like there were other people organizing, and we got put in this giant group of NYU going to DC, which is
actually like how I met Tiff, like a couple of months well, I guess a year into it, after like kind of connecting folks and really just like finding out who in the science advocacy and policy space even existed. I feel as like within science, it just at the time felt very very new and unfamiliar, like having these conversations so openly within lab and within classroom and office spaces. And I met Tiff and we just like hit it up. I don't know, Tiff, you remember we had like coffee at Hungry Ghost, which is also, I feel like this is not sponsored by Chipotle or Hungry Ghost. You're just like naming places.
Well, I went to an open planning meeting actually first with all you guys. And I remember like watching you and Omar speak to the group and just being like in awe of you guys and your organizing and like how passionate you were. And then I think I reached out to you again, Ingrid, to be like, I really want to get involved. Let's talk about this. And we had coffee and talked more. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we actually went to the same. Sorry. I was going to say, I think we went to the same first meeting.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that.
I think so. Yeah. And, Hyro and I came together with a check from Mount Sinai. That's how we kind of got involved with March for Science in the first place. And I remember feeling very kind of afraid of the fact that these are the organizers of March for Science. Oh my God. Because, you guys were grad students when you went the first year. I was an undergrad. And I like drove from Rochester, actually. It was my first time seeing scientists. Yeah, it's my first time seeing scientists civically engaged. And actually, I remember I had found out about the march like the night before it happened. And my friend was like, do you want to drive? And I was like, all right. So we got in a car and we drove to DC like that night. And that's how we ended up at the march. And I saw I remember, I think Lucky was on stage, right? At some point. And like now we know Lucky, and it's like kind of crazy how small the world is. And so when we went to that first planning meeting, I was overwhelmed. But then Omar made a joke about hammers and sickles, and I was like, all right, we're in the right place.
I'm gonna jokes. They always like bring the room together, especially now.
And I think too, Josh, bringing it back to like what's going on with us this year. I mean, there has been so much. I know that March for Science has really become decentralized in a lot of ways, but I think it really did spark so many people to get involved with science policy and advocacy in all these different ways across the country and across the globe. I know in the last year we've been having more of these conversations, but especially pushing the scientific community to be more justice focused. Omar, I think you said it earlier, and I know that Josh introduced our demands, but just to bring them back, is that really when we marched for science 5 years ago, it was broad, right? We were marching for science, but it was like, funding for science, what kind of science we should support, and just like, I think announcing that the scientific community is here, it was like the big thing to come out, right? And then figuring out what that means from community to community was the work that folks were doing, and then have since, either formalized in some ways, such as ourselves, like forming a formal city chapter, but also just, I think, like devoted to their own work. I was talking to someone who organizes in March for Science Chile, and one of their original organizers has like a very high up position within the government on like tech policy and advising and everything. And I was just like, that's super cool to see. But especially because I feel like these conversations weren't and sometimes still aren't easy to have, right? Josh mentioned that our demands in particular in the city are abolitionist. We want to achieve these climate goals and sustainability goals within the city, but we recognize that we can't do this, right, without rethinking our overall structures, which is what folks like Fridays for Future have been rallying for around, their whole mantra being this year, people over profit. Indigenous voices have been repeating for centuries now that we need to rethink our relationship to land. And I think with the Green New Deal, right, which we've seen kind of come after March for Science, thinking about even its relationship to like economic systems and labor, I think people are just like coming in more and more and realizing this. But I'm curious what you guys think, like what it's been like organizing in that space, particularly. I feel like as early, I was gonna say younger, but I don't know, as early career, like folks, what that's been like for
Wait,
you all. Like,
what are you trying to say?
no, I wasn't looking at you, Tiff. I just meant,
We're in our 30s.
I
Tiff.
forget sometimes that I'm not a grad student anymore. Yeah.
So I think at large, biology is a pretty conservative field. The older faculty are very resistant to the idea of like being civically engaged. There's a lot of racism and a lot of sexism in biology in particular. And I think it partially has to do with like how high profile it kind of is. I mean, as you've seen with like the pandemic, right? There's a lot of visibility for biologists. And so, you know, as much as I'd love to say that our work from 2018 to like 2020 was really what started these conversations in New York. I have to give credit where credit's due. Shut down STEM, I feel like really was the turning point, at least in my interaction with our planning, for like how other people in my own field, in my own institution, were engaging with our material. Like we've been saying this for a really long time, but I don't think a lot of people were ready to self-reflect and hear it until after Shut Down STEM.
I agree. Yeah. So shout out, to the folks who organized Movement for Black Lives and put together Shut Down STEM. I was very heartened and surprised at even like, Tiff, I don't know if your department participated, but like our dean at Tandon, which is where I'm at NYU, was like, everyone do this across the board. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, I mean, it is in one way a moment, but I think as we've seen, a lot of folks continue to engage in this work after that day.
Yeah.
It was barely mentioned in my department, to be honest. So there's still work there to be done, at least in the square for the sciences. And as far as personally, I mean, a lot of the concepts we've been talking about over the last couple of years have been very new to me. And so through March for Science, I've actually myself have learned a lot about things like abolition. So I think that not only is March for Science a tool to advocate for these ideas and for these policy changes, but also it's a place for scientists to come and engage and learn how they might fit into like this broader movement as well. So
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
That makes me really happy to hear. That makes me so happy to hear. Like, cause no, like the entire concept when we were trying to figure out like values and the directions and the mission of March for Science, you know, that was a battle between, again, you know, increased funding in the sciences and this sort of like race, gender neutral, like let's just celebrate the sciences, versus no, we need to make sure that our science is used for the common good. We need, you know, the common good means we need to actually advocate for evidence-based policies. We can't keep doing, you know, making life worse for everybody and not actually applying these ways of public safety that are scientifically studied. Like we can't keep increasing prisons that has nothing to do with public safety in the name of public safety, right? And so this was something that, you know, you saying that abolition or the concept of reinvesting our money from failed systems that don't work, have no scientific evidence that they work, to, you know, functioning systems like housing, healthcare, education, you know, that do actually reduce crime systemically and effectively. You know, this concept that we're talking about in a scientific space, and that this is something that you're being introduced to it in a scientific space, that you know, I feel like job well done. You know, this is, I mean, granted, there's so much more work to be done, but that makes me so happy to hear.
Yeah, and
yeah,
just
agree. Go ahead, Josh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, back to your original question about being kind of young scientists organizing in this space. And, you know, I obviously have a ton of different privileges from being like a white male young scientist that a lot of other scientists don't benefit from. Even like this past week when we were advertising our demands for this march, you know, I had a professor who is tenure, very senior, quite famous neuro professor at our school, email me this really nasty email thread about how, you know, we as a movement are detrimental to science because some people won't agree with the social issues we stand behind, right? And I'm able, obviously, to withstand a lot of that kind of criticism from my stance of privilege, right? But I think it's really kind of encouraging to see how many people feel this strongly about the role of scientists, the civic engagement of scientists, to put themselves on the line, right? Like when the stakes are this high. Because in science, I mean, like unlike other industries, I feel the ability for the academy to just kind of crush you because they don't agree with you is so much easier, right? There's no HR that's protecting us or anything like that.
I wrote a line in an email actually to find speakers for our upcoming event that I think is actually kind of related to what you were talking about, Josh. And so I said, one of our driving missions at March for Science NYC is to stress that there are people behind the science, and they both care about the protection of human environment and environmental rights and deserve that protection themselves. So like, we don't just exist in our labs and do our work and then that's it. That's all that we're good for, kind of is what I'm trying to say. But like, we are people too who deserve protection and human rights, and we can advocate for those things as scientists and not have it be relevant to March for Science. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, I feel like, sorry, did I cut someone off?
All you.
Oh, okay. That's okay. I was just going to say, I feel like, now I lost my train of thought. I was going to say, I feel like organizing with March for Science honestly made me a better scientist. I feel like I'm much more better at thinking about things with like a more systems thinking hat on. Like, what are the relationships between, I mean, I worked at a very, 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 very small subset of semiconductor science, synthesizing, these nanocrystals in a lab that theoretically work very well, so on and so forth. But at a larger level, right, what framed my work is this idea that we know that we have certain materials that we use for these applications. They work fine, but at the same time, how are they sourced? How are they recycled? What is the general, like, where is this coming from and what impact does that have on people? And I think rethinking those relationships, like as an advocate, has really helped me think about like what kind of science questions I'm also interested in and how I approach them too. So I feel like that relates a lot, just like, bringing that perspective to my work, which I feel like as scientists, as you all know, feels like a bigger barrier than I think it needs to be, but one that feels like it's closing, at least personally.
But also, like, back to what Josh was saying, with like, we don't have an HR to protect us. There's a whole, like, the message boards, like internally, like the back channels of March for Science is all about like how we're largely like the PhD workforce, the postdoctoral workforce, we're largely like an exploited, highly specialized workforce that are often paid like little to no salary. Like, we're talking like 30K in NYC, right? Or don't have benefits, or can be fired at will, or can just not be paid like for a month of work. Suddenly our money is gone because a grant didn't pull through all the way or something of that sort. So there's this idea of somebody who wasn't a scientist that was in the chat came in and said, you think that we're celebrating the science, that we're celebrating scientists, that we want to like compensate scientists well and make sure you guys have job security and adequate healthcare and can have a family and whatnot. Or you don't think of you as like underpaid, overworked, and sort of stressed about not only the next paycheck, but what happens if you get sick, right? Like, people can be working on solving the next generation or the next healthcare crisis, on solving COVID, but if they get COVID, they're financially ruined, right? And so or cancer would be a better thing, because there's actually funding for COVID, which there should be healthcare for all, but that's not actually a different story. That's something we advocate for, a single payer healthcare for all, because it's cheaper and saves more lives. So again, like, supporting unions, talking to our fellow grad students, like organizing ourselves and organizing our campuses, connecting scientists with the unions and figuring out what grievances exist. Like, this is something that is big in our movement, because it's not just about who's doing the science, what's the broader impact, what's the bigger question, but also making sure that we can eat.
Yeah, I mean, Omar, to that point, like, I think that something that has grown in New York, at least over the time we've been organizing together, has been that scientists didn't really view themselves as a labor force or as a collective, like, labor, right? And I feel like as we begin to organize more and more and connect the universities and the departments and all these different, fields together, people are starting to have a bit of more like collective vision of what the New York City science community looks like, and they're willing to advocate for these things or support things like grad unions. I also though think that, obviously all of the stuff inside of science that needs to change matters a lot, and we need to do a lot of work on that side when it comes to labor. But I think it speaks volumes about the fact that in that context, we've all chosen to focus on climate, right? Like, we understand that there's this bigger existential threat that we need to do something about. And I think that in of itself is so powerful.
Agreed. And I think it goes back to what Tiff said earlier about like our mantra being educate to empower, right? I think we recognize that one, as we were doing this coalition building within STEM, that we needed to reach out to the folks who've been doing this work and want to do this work citywide. And I think that's really where our strength has been as like students, as people who live in New York City, as folks who belong to frontline communities or underserved communities, bringing that mindset of like, we're all, I hate to High School Musical it, but we're all in this together and like trying to it happened as I was saying it, I'm sorry, but really that there's opportunity there, and while acknowledging that that the scientific community has done harm, that just like every other part of every other system that we are critiquing, that we played a part, but that we are also trying to play an active role as the newer younger generation of scientists to come up and really like create an actual first of all livable but then sustainable place for us all. I know we've been talking for a while, but I do want to talk about what that's going to look like on Saturday. So Josh, do you want to talk about what exactly we have planned going on?
Yeah, so it's super exciting. We've basically gotten the space in the 72nd Street entrance to Central Park on the west side, which is one of the biggest entrances to Central Park, and that's where our rally is going to be. So come between 11:30 and noon. The rally starts at noon, and we'll have speakers ranging from topics like city infrastructure, investing in green spaces, no new jails, things like this. And then we're going to turn and rally our march to move south. So we'll go down Central Park West, and then we're going to cut across down Broadway and eventually find our way down to Bryant Park. And I think one thing that we're doing that's unique this year for our march is that we want it to be a full day of action for people who come. And so what we've done is actually we've gotten a ton of different partner organizations to plan actions at Bryant Park for the end of our event. This ranges from training people on how to training people to register others to vote so they can go out and register voters. Thank you. Disseminating vaccine and mask information, a seed swap for growing local and domestic plants, sending out material for all these different climate organizations in the city. And I hope that people who attend our march will be able to take that information and bring it back to their home communities and continue their day of action beyond our march.
Yeah, and if you're not in New York, we're going to have ways through the whole March for Science network to plug in digitally as well. There's also events going on in Dallas that you'll hear more about from folks at EarthX. But for Omar and Tiff, if you want to pitch maybe Omar, I know you're doing an event earlier in the week, and then Tiff, we have our Earth Day, we have a lot going on, Earth Day Initiative live stream on Thursday that everyone can tune in from anywhere. So maybe do y'all want to share how folks can plug in?
Sure, yeah. So R&D, so they're an organization that funds, prototypes for climate, advancing technology to basically combat or mitigate climate change. So they fund prototypes for that investigation. So they invited myself along with Steve Clemmer from the Director of Energy Research, Union Concerned Scientists, Ellen McRae from the Regional Climate Services Director from NOAA, to watch the movie The Human Element and then to have sort of a panelist discussion on what we saw and what does it mean. So please join us. It's Tuesday, April 19th, 7 p.m. Eastern, and it will be you can check them out, rnd.org, and we'll be promoting it on our socials as well. So that way, if you need to click in and join, you're more than welcome to.
And then Thursday, the 21st, we're partnering with Earth Day Initiative for our yearly event. Now yearly, it's our third year doing Earth Day Initiative. In Union Square, physically in person for the first time in 3 years from 12 to 7 p.m. Exhibitor booths will feature environmental organizations and climate organizations like ourselves, Fridays for Future, and many, many, many more. And then there will be a virtual broadcast that same day from 1 to 8 p.m. if you're not able to come out and see us in person. Let me just rattle off some names that are part of this broadcast that day. So we'll have Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Do we need to name anyone else?
U.S. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. We'll have Senator Ed Markey speaking. Local activists like Karen Washington and ourselves. Alexandria Villasenor will say something. So many others throughout the day. We have a full broadcast covering things like capitalism versus climate, U.S. climate action, climate vulnerability and adaptation, meat consumption, food sovereignty and labor. It goes on and on and on and on. So we'll have plenty of stuff to get you through Earth Day this year.
Also, excitingly, we just found out we got Robert Downey Jr. and I'm so excited. Like, you have no idea.
That's a good cap.
We got Iron Man. We got Iron Man.
Yeah, and that'll be streaming actually live from this Facebook page, the March for Science page, all day long as well. So you'll be able to catch it right here. And wherever you are, if you're participating in Earth Day programming, whether you are a longtime March for Science advocate or a satellite organizer or just someone who's doing work in your community, we are definitely here to, uplift you and amplify your voice. Definitely feel free to reach out to me, write us in the comments, tag us on social media, let us know what's going on. And we'll see you for Earth Day a week from today. Bye.
We heart it out. We heart it out.
Are we doing that?
Oh, we do heart it out.
Yeah.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.